We're now entering the middle horizon, and again, a horizon references a time period in Peruvian history when a great power had broad influence. In the middle horizon, however, we have two powers, which is not what we might expect, but they both have incredible influence and spread of authority over relatively vast regions. So it's a shared period in history where we have in the northern portion of Peru, Wari, which we'll get to shortly. There'll be another talkie on that. And in the southern area, and that includes highlands as well as coast, we have Tiwanaku, and Tiwanaku is particularly important to us because it is located in a little bit of Peru, which is here, a little bit of Bolivia, and a little bit of Chile, going all the way to the Atacama Desert and also establishing colonial outposts. So we do feel that Tiwanaku had a great deal of influence, spreading its ideas through, in particular, through trade coming along the Yama caravans. This period, the middle horizon, will come about after the first intermediate period, which was fragmented, in which we saw the Nazca and the Moche culture, Moche in the north, Nazca in the south. And these folks are going to suffer from the results of really bad climate conditions, upheavals that cause difficulties growing crops and providing for people. So it will be a collapse, we think, that is due to climate issues that cause Nazca and Moche to lose authority and to lose control. In their absence, Tiwanaku and Wari are going to rise up. They're going to kind of fill a void. And the deal is, this is going to be a period of uncertainty. People are not going to understand what happened. They're also not going to understand why the gods did not help them. So it's going to be a period in time which we think is based on more long-standing religious traditions centered on shamanism, and a return to the shaman as a very central figure who's going to help to reinforce belief that we will be able to grow our crops and reproduce our animals. In other words, fertility for purposes of survival. As a part of this, of course, there will be sacrifices, probably not on a hugely large scale, but nevertheless, there will be human sacrifice also in addition to that animal sacrifice. This then is a period of recovery in terms of political expanse and power, but one that is different in flavor, where the religion is not going to focus quite as much on supernatural divine beings as it will on shamans. Tiwanaku is particularly important because its religious beliefs as well as its art are going to spread through the region with Yama caravans. And that's going to be you trade your goods, but along with your goods, you also expose people to your art style and to your ideas. There is also going to be a set of shared stylistic elements as well as religious elements between Tiwanaku and the Wari. So we're going to see some similarities between them. And I have to assume, you see this section right here of real estate, that it might have been particularly tense to be at the border between these two regional powers during the Middle Horizon. The image that I have is from the main site of Tiwanaku, and it is centered in Bolivia near Lake Titicaca. The most famous of the archaeological ruins are located there, and you're looking at the iconic image from that site. In looking at that image, you should immediately be thinking of influence from earlier traditions, particularly Chavin, and you should be thinking about the Chavin staff god. Also, the ideas and importance of transformation that comes out of Chavin. We believe that to be true even though we have no direct evidence of a link with Chavin. We suspect that particularly for Tiwanaku, that the culture is looking back to the other highland site that had a great unifying influence on the regions of the Andes back in the early horizon. This is a site plan of the portion of Tiwanaku. This was an architectural construction, a rather large one, located very close to Lake Titicaca. Titicaca itself, the lake as we call it, can more accurately be described as a sea. It's very, very large. It's an inland source of fish, of plants, of wildlife, and great resources for all of the folks who lived here. The folks at Tiwanaku also were settled on a high plain or an altiplano. This was about, well, almost 13,000 feet in altitude. So in all of my pictures, you're going to see crisp blue skies that reflect the clarity of the air that one gets at such high altitudes. They were located with mountains to the east, we're talking Andes, so we're talking about sacred mountains, large mountains, mountains that are the source of water. They had also agricultural fields that were on the way down, lower altitude, on the way to the jungle. So it's very, very possible that these folks thought of themselves as a kind of midpoint, or you can think axis mundi, and that might be what was intended with the Akapana, which is the highest site at Tiwanaku, which we're going to look at very shortly. Because of the plain, and the plain means a vast expanse of landscape around you, where it's very easy to observe the skies. That includes the movement of the sun as well as the stars at night. It is very clear from investigating the site that survives, the remains that survive, that it was laid out using astronomical alignments. I would like you to check the reading in Smart History, which will help you to see more of those. We definitely know that the solstices were marked and the equinoxes were marked, and there was a special interest with the sun, which was so visible in the sky that we do believe that its zenith, when it's overhead each day, that we have a way of marking that as well. So a complex society, carefully enmeshed with nature, and also very aware of the skies, and I would say of geography. These are reconstructions, including figure 113, lower left in our textbook, that will give you a little bit of an idea of what Tiwanaku looked like back in the day. What we have left of it is mostly stone materials. The houses of the people were created out of perishable goods. Consequently, they're gone, but we do have the remains of the ceremonial center, and that's what we're looking at. In particular, our textbook gives us a diagram of the Akapana, and we have it up here as well, and over here also. This would be the remains of temple complex that is known as the Kalasasya, and it is the location. If we go right over here, it's a little cut off on my slide, but right there is where the Gate of the Sun was actually found, this kind of monolithic portal that has become the iconic image for Tiwanaku. The building that I'd like to focus on right now is the Akapana, and this is the highest area that was constructed at the sacred site, and we do think that it was at one point viewed as an axis mundi. The entire shape of this, if you go around the edges of this, is half a chicana. And that's an Andean cross, so I'd like you to come over here and take a look at that. This is a shape that we've looked at before, and it can be traced all the way back to Chavin. And of course, in the center, there is a circle which may, in fact, reference the axis mundi. The form of the Akapana itself reflects the shape of the distant mountain peak, the one that is the tallest, the biggest, Iamani. So we think that it was constructed as a reference to that pretty sacred peak. This construction also had at its very heart an open area, which was an area we believe was filled with water. You could think of it as a sunken court with a pool, a reflecting pool. We know that at least during the periods of heavy rain, it would have been an important portion of the design of the building because the waters which would be collected here actually could be carried with a system of drainage pipes running to the various levels of the step pyramid so that it would seem to flow down the sides of the pyramid, cascading and gushing and making a roaring sound a little bit. Perhaps like what was experienced when you went to visit Chivin de Wantar. But it definitely makes a reference to the mountain, the real mountain, that is Iamani, that would be the source of water for the people. And it duplicates that by actually showing us the waters come down the sides of the step pyramid. The Akapana has two staircases, one here and one on the, I'm going to call it the front of it, oriented east-west. Sadly, the top of it was heavily looted. There were burials up there, at least one rather grand one, and this became a site for heavy looting. As a result of that, we really don't know the original shape of it. It is often reconstructed as a chicana, as an Andean cross, and maybe that's the shape it had. And it is also definitely referenced as an axis mundi, which we do think was the thinking of the people who actually created this. We also think that it was associated with shamanism because on those upper terraces, a series of tenon heads, and tenon heads again should make you think of Chivin, represent human heads and puma heads, in other words, felines, suggesting transformation of the shaman as the shaman changes from human form to puma or feline form. There are a number of Andean crosses at this site, including figure 112, which you do have in your textbook. It comes a little bit closer to a traditional form for chicana, matching the black chicana that I have in the upper right on the screen. I also give you two other forms as samples on my slide just to take a look at. The one that our textbook author is using actually comes from one of the other sections of the ritual center referred to as Pumapunka, and it was there that the Gate of the Sun, which is the famous, most famous object from this archaeological site, actually was located, linking, in other words, the Gate of the Sun with the Chicana, and also probably with ideas associated with shamanism. We do know that San Pedro was used here, and of course we can't prove it, but if you take a look again at my cross-section of San Pedro, it might behoove you to think about the center as the axis mundi, as a way of traveling to another reality, a part of the tiered existence we all share. The Akapana was a completely man-made mountain. Because of the looting here, it really needed an intensive restoration. And in my lower right slide, you can see a little bit of that going on as the folks in Bolivia are trying to bring this monument back. The reason I have this image here, though, is so you can see the mountain in the background. And that mountain also appears in the slide in the upper right. It is the mountain. Let's take a look at it, snow-capped. Here is a bit better picture of Iumane. It's the highest peak of the Andes in southern Bolivia. It's located more or less near La Paz. It's an amazing peak with a snow line essentially at 15,000 feet. The north face of this actually has glaciers. The site of Tiwanaku, I said, came in, I think, a little bit under 13,000 feet in altitude. So we're talking about being up there, folks. But we're also talking about massive peaks that much of the time have snow on them, but that snow does melt and is a visible source of water. The stepped form clearly echoes the mountain that this monument is aligned to. What we're looking at is the restoration that's been done at the site today, perhaps too much restoration in order to encourage tourism. That has brought the question about whether or not this is going to be removed from the list of World Heritage Sites because perhaps the inaccuracy of some of the restoration, which remains an issue.